there's a scene in there which I love, which some argue is sort of brushed over, and that's Bruce Wayne's sort of emotional detachment from when Rachel is killed. And I think that he's sort of, some people will argue that scene is sort of quickly done, but I would argue that it's very, he is emotionally distraught by that turn of events, but he finds it in himself to continue, whereas Harvey doesn't.
Yeah, I never got that, to be honest, watching the film. I thought that part was well done with Bruce Wayne, again, as we talked about in the Batman Begins review, that line where Alfred comes and comforts him but explains the reality and gravity of the situation to him. I thought that scene was well done. Where I did think was brushed over was Harvey Dent's transformation. I know he has that conversation with the Joker, but to me, that one conversation wouldn't sway this completely, honourable and righteous district attorney into complete insane homicidal madness.
I think that works. I think it because he's lost essentially everything. He's lost Rachel. He's lost his face. In a way, yeah, he's lost his face. In a way, he's lost the people of Gotham as well to this terrorist. He has nothing to lose, and I think that the Joker only instills in him what he was already thinking when lying in the hospital bed before that conversation occurred, and the Joker just sort of he was already on the edge, and the Joker just gave him a little push, as it were.
But I do like. That being said, I did think it was done very quickly, but I do like that element came into play in the film, because for ages people were saying like, oh well, Two-Face is only in this film for like the last 20 minutes, but to me, I don't think Two-Face could carry an entire film on his own. I think that the role he had in the film really, brought to the forefront the message, and the ending scene where he's got Gordon's kid with a gun. I mean, going back to your point in Batman Returns review, this scene where Harvey Dent, Two-Face, has got the gun to Gordon's son, that's merited because he wants Gordon to feel the pain that he felt at the loss of his love, Rachel.
Yeah, and he is very. It's established throughout that he does flip the coin for chance and for luck, and it's how he explains he got his first date with Rachel, flipping the coin, and that's a catalyst for this sort of. He uses that as a way of justice, and I think that ending scene, while some would argue that it was stretching for time, and so the last half hour of the film, whilst tense, could be argued that it was sort of stretching. That ending was really sort of, because Harvey fell so far from grace, and eventually he had to. Batman sort of didn't really kill him. He tried to stop him from killing his son, from Gordon's son, but they just fell off the edge. That's what it seemed like to me, and it seems that because Harvey fell so far from grace and fell so far from his moral code, that Batman's now willing to take the blame for it, for killing Harvey Dent, because that's what he wants to preserve. This is essentially a lie that he wants to preserve Harvey's symbol, and that's what I get from it. That he really wants to keep Harvey Dent alive as a figure, not necessarily as a person, but as a figure of hope.
Well, he wants to keep his message alive, and that's one thing that I don't really think we've seen a lot of in superhero films, certainly not in a Batman film, in that This shows Batman trying to save Gotham in another way than just going out and physically fighting a villain. He wants to preserve the the thoughts and hopes that this man preached by really just like making himself out to be a murderer and not a hero of Gotham. And for a hero to do that, it shows that he's completely dedicated in this task to preserving Gotham and preserving hope in the people after this ordeal with the Joker as well.
Yeah, and I mean we have to sort of talk about Heath Ledger's posthumous Oscar, well deserved, and I think just it wasn't for the fact that he died during the making or after he filmed his scenes. It was a terrific performance and it was well deserved. It wasn't because of the fact. I like to think it wasn't because of the fact that he
I agree, because I mean before this point I'd never even heard of I'd heard of Heath Ledger, but I'd never watched any of his films, and I went to see this performance, I mean even from the trailer alone, and wow, just to me Heath Ledger just stole the show in this film. Every scene he was in, he just completely embodied the role of the Joker, and it's almost scary in fact to see when you watch some of his other films how well he did that, and just it was one of the best performances I think I've ever seen in a film ever, and it goes down like his performance is one of the best on-screen villains of all time, easily.
I have to admit, I do think this does, because there was such a dramatic transformation in terms of Heath Ledger himself, really physically and mentally getting into the role of the Joker, the head of the Joker, that he's unrecognisable, and I think that's something that was severely lacking in Batman 1989, and I really do think that that Heath Ledger's Joker trumps Jack Nicholson's just on because of the preparation that went into the role. Jack Nicholson's Joker you recognise as Jack Nicholson. When I first saw this, The Dark Knight, I knew that Heath Ledger was in playing the Joker, but he wasn't. I didn't recognise him straight away. He was an unrecognisable face, and that's what I love about his performance.
To me, I think it's a bit hard to like judge all the Jokers on the same playing field, because they have all been made like for so many different types of audiences and over different times in the comics and everything. And I think it's harsh to like judge all the Jokers on the same level. I think they're all good in their own way, but to me there are two scenes in this film. I mean every scene's good, but to me there's two that really seals the deal that Heath Ledger was just put everything into this role and genuinely terrified me in parts of this film. And the first scene is probably one of my favourite, most chilling scenes on screen of all time. It's the interrogation video where he explains that if Batman doesn't take off his mask, then he's going to show how crazy he can be. Batman has to turn himself in. Where he's got this impersonator of Batman in this chair, and he just like yells, "Look at me!" And that scene, you could have heard a pin drop in the cinema when I went to see this film at that unseen. It was so perfectly done, and you didn't expect it because you didn't know whether he was going to be light and jokey or sadistic or completely satanic. And the second scene is the whole interrogation scene with Batman and the Joker. That my favourite scene in the film, hands down.
I completely agree, and the same thing happened in the when I first went to see this. That everyone just sort of stopped and for a moment, and because that's the beauty of the Joker in The Dark Knight, is that he is so unpredictable. And you don't know what he's going to do, and even Batman doesn't know what he's going to do. Even Gordon doesn't know even Harvey Dent doesn't know what he's going to do. He's such an unpredictable villain But there's unpredictable villains like in No Country for Old Men who do unpredictable things because, I don't know, that's how he's written. Then there's unpredictable because that's the way he thinks. And that's the way he does things. And that's what he wants. And that's his character. And that's the unpredictability of his message and his moral code and his ethics. And that's the beauty of the Joker in The Dark Knight, and I simply think that is a masterful piece of like. In fact, I would go as far to say as I could, watching his performance, I really couldn't see anyone else in that specific role. I'm thinking of trying to think of actors that could possibly have done that. And Heath Ledger wasn't. I mean, I've seen his earlier work, and some of it's good and some of it's not so great. But he was very much the romantic type. He used to play the pretty boy in films like 10 Things I Hate About You, but because he was so. He wanted to get out of that typical romanticized typecasting, and he pulled it off so well, and he left nothing to the wolves, and he literally just changed his whole persona. And this as a somewhat of a hobbyist actor, this is what I want to do. I want to get inside, get into a character like that, and that's.
Well,
No,
he did play the role very well. You could argue there's some inconsistencies in the writing of his character, like how far really could the Joker predict that everything would play out like this? Like that he would get caught, that he would be put in that exact cell, that he would get a phone call to blow up the police department and escape. And you could raise that, but it's established very early on that he says that he really look like a guy with a plan, but he is. He's got this all worked out. And while it is a bit of a stretch for him to plan this far ahead, I think it goes back to he's a character that's established from early on, that even from the very first scene with the bank robbery, that he is just so maniacal and genius, you could argue, that he has constructed this huge scheme to just break down Batman and Harvey Dent and the world around him, and he just wanted to watch the world burn, and that's exactly what he does.
See, I find that him as a character, though he has these grand plans, he essentially wants to create. He's creating a symbol of his own, and he wants to get his. He does not care if he is physically killed in anything, because I mean there's that bank robbery scene at the very beginning of the film.
Oh yeah, most notably the one where he stands in the middle of the highway as Batman's driving towards him on a bike. He seems very willingly to, when he's thrown off the building at the end, he's laughing because he knows that he has proved that Batman will kill people.
Yeah, and he wants to show, and that's the beauty of the film, of the piece. He's very much a character that is willing to give his life to this idea, and he will do anything he can for this idea, even so far as to have himself, get run over by Batman. Which that's the beauty of it, and I think it's masterfully done.